Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dear Rach and Soph. Hi, Soph. How are you?
I'm very well, Rach. Always happy to see you. It brightens my week.
You too. I look forward to these chats so much now. I hope we do them even if no one's ever listening. But I do think people are listening because we've both been tagged in a number of posts over the last week on Facebook. So
Yeah.
thank you so much to if some of those people who have tagged us on Instagram, I should say, and shared the podcast. Really big thanks to you guys. That makes our day, and it means that we know that there's also people that are listening to us chat. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And it's
And
great to find out that the information's useful because we've had some
yeah.
feedback to that effect that it's really helpful. And I think that's what we're both hoping for out of this, that we can be helpful, useful.
100%. Aside from me just getting my regular Sophie therapy, we hope that we can help other writers at various stages of their writing career. And if you have liked it, please don't forget to rate us and leave a review on wherever you listen to your podcast, because that really helps us. So, Sophie, I think we haven't actually had a chat for a week or so, but I've
Yeah.
been seeing you all over the place on the internet. So, how's your week gone?
Look, it's been pretty hectic in a great way. Part of it involved writing for you a recap of
Thank
Farmer
you
Wants a
so much
Wife.
for
Uh,
doing that.
You're very welcome. And it was an interesting exercise because I was madly like typing notes. I wanted to get direct quotes from people on the show, started to think about themes. So I was thinking of it in a storytelling way, in a fashion that I have not thought of it as a plain old viewer, because it became clear what the editing process can be like and how
Mm.
storylines are shaped by the producers. So that was a really good exercise for me to pay attention to. And now I'll look a little more.
I was gonna say, so I've got a question in a second. Hopefully I remember it. Do you pay? Yeah. I'll say the question now, then we can both remember before I say what I was gonna say quickly. Is that do you think like obviously you watched it differently
Mm.
because you were reading it. So I mean what like writing something up. So in some ways I feel like that's how writers read because we're constantly all anyway, hold that thought because I just
Okay.
want to do a quick thing for anyone who has no idea what we're talking about and thinks this is a writing podcast. Just wanted to let you know that I, for a few years now, have been watching each season of Farmer Wants a Wife and recapping it on my Facebook page. Um, and I have had a couple of times this season where I've had to go out. And last season, when I did that, I just stayed up really late and did it. And it meant that I was tired for the rest of the week and all that. So this time I've been much smarter and I've enlisted help. So I enlisted Renee Black a couple of weeks ago, who was on our podcast as well. And this week, when I had to go and do an event myself at Fremantle Library, I enlisted Sophie. So I really appreciate that. And it makes me realize too, I watch it differently. Like when I'm having to watch, I miss heaps of stuff, but I'm writing notes and I'm thinking, like I'm watching it to make sure I don't catch up and I'm thinking how do I feel about each person. So
Mm.
when you and Renee wrote it, I could literally just, you know, sit back and relax and enjoy it. So I wonder if that turning that around to reading and writing, yeah, do you think you read differently? I mean, it must be double difficult for you because I read as a writer when I'm reading a lot of the time, but you must read as a writer and an editor.
I do. And so my patience levels are not high. But also, I should say, when I was writing official Home and Away tie-in novels, I
Yeah.
watched Home and Away as a writer
Same way.
work
Yeah.
out what they were doing. And that made me appreciate the show a lot more than I had in the past. And I had been a Home and Away website producer years before. So I already love the show. But watching how they did it from a writing point of view was fascinating. And I just thought
Mm.
this is such a slick operation in a great way. And that's
How
why I
many of
thought,
those books did you write?
oh, there were two, and they were ebook only. Yeah.
I was gonna say, can I still get them? I want to read them. I used to love Home and Away back in the day.
And they were, one of them was an adaptation of a special that they did, and then
Yeah.
another was a story continuation for two characters who had left. But
Cool.
it made me just think that I appreciated the writing team already there, but I do think they do an amazing job. And so I often say to people, if you're interested in writing for a large audience, that show is worth studying and looking
Mm.
closely at how they keep readers with them and how they introduce big storylines, but also how they continue the world that they've built now over 3 decades.
Yeah.
All the
Wow.
little signifiers that go into not just the sets, but also into the way the characters talk to each other, the information they convey. It's really
Hmm.
clever.
Um, before we get on to what else you've been doing, I just want to ask you a question, because when you said, I think you said, you almost said something there about how you read, you're quite
Oh,
strict.
my patience levels.
Yeah, patience levels. Is that what you said? And I actually was thinking this week when I was reading a book, and I've abandoned it. It's one that I thought that I would really enjoy, and a lot of people have been raving about. And I've abandoned it. And I was actually thinking, because now I just think in terms of what would Sophie do? No, no, I was just wondering, like, do you DNF books?
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
at what stage do you DNF and why?
This is for a published book.
Yeah,
I'll give
yeah,
it.
like one you've chosen to read, I guess, like not
Yeah,
reading because of work or anything.
I'll give it like 20 pages, and
Wow,
if
that's not
I'm
lots, is it?
starting to, by that stage, I'm like, I'll just skip on a little bit in case the storyline's looking a little bit
So
interesting.
you skim read a bit.
A bit, well, actually, not so much skim readers, just jump forward a few pages and just have a look at the dialogue in particular and see what's going on. And if it's
It grabs you.
still not moving a lot, like if I can tell that many pages on that we haven't moved on much, I just
Hmm.
think, oh, this is going too slowly, and or there's not been enough character development or whatever it is, and I will
Yep.
not finish it. Nonfiction, I tend to always finish because I've usually picked it, as most nonfiction readers pick a book for the subject matter.
Yeah,
I'm
yep.
interested in that subject matter, but for a novel, if it's not doing its job, I do not have time to finish it.
Yeah. I'm a bit like that too. I think I give it slightly longer than you, depending on the book. I suppose it depends how much hype's been around it. And often, this is stupid, but often I think, what's wrong with me that I'm not liking this book that everybody else supposedly likes? But then I think a lot of that, what we see out there is hype, isn't it? And it's people thinking, well, hang on, everyone else likes this, so I better, kind of say that I do. And then it sort of, you know what I mean?
There was one book that was huge that I finished, even though I kept saying to myself, I can't, I don't want to go on it. And that was A Little Life by Hanya
Oh
Yanagihara.
yeah, I know. I haven't
And
read that. It's too looks too thick for me.
it's the writing is wonderful, and I was invested in the characters, but at a certain point I thought, I'm just so miserable, I don't know that I can continue.
Yeah,
And some people love that in a book. They
yeah,
want
yeah.
to be
I
made
don't.
miserable. There was a point at which I realized the editing part of my brain that I would have ended it if I'd
Yeah.
been her edit. I would have said, okay, we finish it here, and then it went on for like another
Wow.
30,000 words or
Oh my
something.
gosh.
And
Yeah.
so and I think other people have observed at the same point it could have finished and been a fantastic book right then. But then we sort of went deeper and deeper into the mire. And by the end, I just remember thinking, well, I'm never getting that time back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it's
I'm not going to read it ever. I don't think. I
it
think I'm
is
not.
renowned. Some people love it, and it's just an example of how taste can really vary. And I
Yeah,
think,
I definitely. And the time when you read something. That's why,
yeah,
like, I was thinking that
definitely.
this book that I was reading the other day, I'm thinking, is it me? Like, is it me? I think that's why I ask, is it me? Is it me? Like, obviously, so many people have loved this book, and it's like, is it just the time that I'm reading it that I'm not in the right frame of mind or something?
Well, that you
So,
don't need it. I think that's also part of it. So
oh
much
yeah,
of
that's an interesting
storytelling
way.
is whether we need something at that point in time as opposed to wanting it. You might think you want a book that's going to make you miserable because you feel like a good cry, but then you may not actually need to have
Need
a good
that.
cry. You may need to be distracted and have
Yeah.
something lighthearted. So you'd be better off reading a rom-com.
Yeah. Well, I know you have a gig to go out to, but before we get on to the topic of today, which is a writing completely crafty, hopefully related topic in terms of what we find hard when we write. But before, I have done really nothing this week apart from, well, I did an event which was lovely, and went to some of the places that were in my book, The Other Bridget,
How
which,
great is that? Actually, when you posted on social media that you were going to Fremantle Library, I think that was,
yeah, no, it was.
and that's where the book is set.
And
With
Darling
Mother
Darling, which
Bridget.
is the pub. If you ever come to WA, Perth, I have to take you to Freo into Darling Darling pub which is in the book. And it's very cool
Right.
because since the book, it's a pirate bar, and since the book came out, lots of people have gone into it saying that they found it because of the book. So now I get free drinks there all the
I was
time.
about to say, did you go in and say, hello, it's
Yeah,
me?
no, he's messaged me on Instagram before, the guy who owns it, and said that he's got lots of people coming in, and he wasn't there that night, but when I talked to the barman that was there, I'm like, is Nigel here? He's the owner. And he said no. I was like, okay, do you know what his wife's name is, because I want to write her name in the book he's like, no, thinking I'm this crazed person. And then I was like, oh, because I want to give him this book. And he's like, oh, are you Jennifer? He said, I've only worked here 3 weeks and people have come in that time. So
Oh,
So
that's
yeah,
great.
I get free drinks at Darling Darling now. That's good. So I'll have to take you there. But yes, you have, while I was doing that, you've been to Melbourne this week. And why did you go to Melbourne? Tell everyone.
For the Australian Book Industry Award. So in my publisher life, I published Love and Pain by Ben Gillies and Chris Joannou from Silverchair, and that was up for a Biography of the Year award. It did not win.
Exciting.
We had a very pleasant evening.
Still getting nominated is great though, right?
Oh, it's fantastic. Ben's wife Jackie was there. Some people will know her from the Real Housewives of Melbourne, and Ben and Jackie and I have been friends for quite a long time. And Chris's wife Carissa was there, so it was a really
Nice,
lovely
nice.
evening. And
So you're catching up with lots of other people in publishing and stuff too. Yeah.
yeah, it was good fun. And then my plane was delayed on the way back to Sydney. It was delayed going down as well. I feel that delays are part of our air travel experience, like a default setting now. So I prepare for it. I always make
Yeah,
sure I've
yeah.
got buffers
How
and time.
long have you been at Hachette?
It'll be 10 years in October.
Were you at the Arbias when I won?
Probably. Oh, I don't go every year. I only go in certain years. So either if something's nominated, or
Yeah.
I think if they're making up numbers, to be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. Oh, well, I've only ever been once, and yeah, it was a pretty good night because the Patterson Girls won General Fiction Book of the Year, but I don't know if I'll ever get back there again. So it was nice watching it on.
And if someone hasn't read the Patterson Girls, someone listening, then they can look for the Arvia winner sticker that's no doubt
Yes,
on it.
I think so. All right, shall we get to today's actual chat, which is
Yes.
about, because basically I just want you to tell me how to fix all my issues. And so I'm sure some of my issues are the same as other people's. Have you got issues? Have you got a list?
Do you mean generally in terms of writing craft?
I was gonna say not life issues. Yeah. No, I thought today we could discuss the things, yeah, not the writing business, not the writing life so much, but the actual nitty-gritty of writing the book, the parts, small bits or big bits that we find tough. So I've got a couple of things here. I've listed description actually as one something that I really find quite difficult. Hooks, making sure, at the end of your chapters that there's something that makes people want to sort of keep turning the pages. I've also written timelines because I hate them. I've got some thoughts on that. And one of the biggest things which not upsets me, but I find hard, and I think some people just ignore it and don't do it these at all, but is transitions sort of from one point of the book to the next. So they're my 4 things that I kind of picked out as things which I don't know if struggles the exact word, but sometimes they cause me issues. And I think, other parts, I find dialogue probably quite easy. I find the beginning of writing books quite easy. So I guess everyone has their strengths and things that they think they could, work on. So have you got any things that you would say?
I'd probably not actually identify them that cleanly. Actually,
Yeah.
I think you've got better language for it than I do, because in my experience of writing things, if I'm stuck on something, I'll actually just walk away from it for a period of time. So I'll just think, oh, okay, I don't, that's not flowing at the moment. I'm just going to leave it and I'll come back to it in a few hours. My greatest difficulty with writing novels is actually in the redrafting. And I think I've mentioned before.
You mean the editing stage, or
Yeah,
a redraft that you do by yourself before?
No, the editing stage, the structural editing stage, when I've had a report and I need to work through it because it's someone else's thoughts and opinions and feelings about and trying to interpret those and apply them to what I have done, and then make them fit and make it all work, and also try to be true to the story that I believe I'm writing. That just feels hard in my body actually, and can be quite upsetting. I think I've mentioned that I usually take Panadol before I read the structural report, so that I don't get too upset. And I used to think, oh, don't be such a baby, but now I realize that it's an authentic, true response to what is going on. This is not me having a petulant tantrum, and it's not an ego-based tantrum. That's what I worked out a while ago. This is not me being in my ego going, oh, this is ridiculous, I don't know what they're talking about. It's actually, I can feel it. It's just this feeling partly of I have failed. That is a big emotion that comes up. But also, I don't know what
I would say that's bad because, no one writes the thing first draft is perfect, and there's always ways to improve, isn't there?
Yeah. But it's my instinctual response. And so what I've realized now, the further I've gone on, is that just acknowledge that is my instinctual response. It's a valid response at that moment in time, but I need to get past it in
Yep.
order to do the work, because there is always work to do. As much as it would be lovely to wave a magic wand and have the first draft be the
Oh,
best draft, it's never going to be. So
that would be so good, wouldn't it? Would
yeah.
take so much stress out of our lives, and I would make things really. So there's nothing like actually in the specific writing of the book that you would say you can't
Nothing
pinpoint.
that I think nothing that I would particularly identify like that. I think there are many things. I've just never given them a name. It's more that as I'm going through, I'll just think, and then I might make a note. Actually, I don't ever put comments in the manuscript because I get annoyed by the.
So do I. Oh my gosh, same. I think, oh, I should make a note here, but I do not want that in
I
there in
don't
my
want.
first
I
draft.
no. It's
I
just
feel
too much
exactly the same.
real estate on the
Yeah,
screen.
I
So
do
I
not
tend
like
to
that
just make a
either.
note, like get back to that. And I might note which page I'm on, just say, go back to that. And often I find just in the writing down of it, I don't need to look at that again because it will have
Because it's
been
just
sorted out. Yeah.
jolted in your head or kind of thing. I'm going to sidetrack us for a second because I also, before I get to this though, I've also got a list. I asked on Threads, which I'm very rarely on,
Right.
for what other people find difficult in writing. And I thought we could go through my list and their list, and
Mhm.
maybe you could help us out because you're an editor. And
So
you
let's do
could,
your list.
yeah. And so, but before that, I just realized we forgot to discuss one thing at the beginning. Now, I believe you have made a decision this week.
Mm. I have. I am definitely going to write a book for next year, which several weeks ago I declared was not happening. So,
That's so exciting. So it's all signed off now, kind of thing,
well, I have
at that
agreed
stage.
to it, and the contract is forthcoming. So that will be for August next
So
year,
when do you have to write that by?
the 1st of October.
Wow. And so, because I mean, I have to finish a book by June and then I have to write another one by, because I too sort of had a bit of a panic and said I wasn't going to write 2 a year maybe, but then I've kind of said I'll try and just see what happens. Like I just go back and forth. Um, so I've got to write one by June and then another one by the end of the year.
Hmm.
But I just do that. And I'm just, how will you now, like, will you, obviously you haven't been writing for a few months, you've been doing some proofreading and different stuff, but so what will change now over the next few months for you in terms of now you've got a deadline?
Well, so I just want to acknowledge, though, you're saying writing is all you're doing, but you will also be editing one book while you're working on another.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
have that, and I do think that's a difficult thing to manage because you've got
Yeah,
two
yeah. And
different
I'm
stories.
lucky now I've finished that. So, but yeah, and then the next one will come along and I'll have to edit. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
so that's a
oh no,
challenge.
I'm not trying to diminish what either of us do. I just know that, yeah, like I don't have to leave the house for something else. And, this is my kind of first priority is not probably the right word because I know yours is priority too. You know what I mean? Like, but how will your life, like, right, or your life change now that you're going to do that for the next few months?
So I'll do the planning documents first. That will happen within the next week. So I
Mhm.
will just sit down and I'll do all my character profiles. I will start to think about the major plot points. I have already done a lot of that thinking because I wrote a proposal to send to the
Yeah,
publisher,
yeah.
but just I will get some actual documents done.
Make it a bit more.
I can refer to them and then I'll start. And this one popped into my head almost fully formed,
Yeah, that's so
which
exciting.
doesn't always happen. Art Hour at the Duchess Hotel, which is the one that's out this year in August, that was something that I'd started years ago and I had to abandon 20,000 odd words that I'd already written and go back and forth and back and forth. That was quite a different process. This one's fresh. I've not written a word apart from the proposal. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun one. And I'm approaching it in the spirit of fun and just thinking, great, well, I get to spend some time with
Well,
these.
I know what it is about. Are you willing to share anything else
Not
yet?
yet. No, that's
Yeah, no, that's
privileged
fine.
information.
That's fine. We will share with you in due course,
Yeah.
probably, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But congratulations on that. That's super
Thank you.
exciting.
Yeah,
And
it'll be fun.
see how it goes.
Yeah.
We'll keep everyone updated with both our writing projects as the year progresses, I'm sure. But so I'll just maybe read through the list of what other people. So I asked on Threads, what do people find difficult in writing? I think on there I said I find transitions. So like getting from, you know, one scene to the next where you don't just want to, do you know what I mean? You don't just want to cut to it. It feels
Yeah.
like there needs to be a little bit of something in between.
Mm.
And maybe some writers would just cut to it. Like I've got a couple of friends who just like, and I've heard that the advice, don't write the boring book, but bits, kind of thing. But I don't know if it's the genre I write or what, but sometimes I do feel like, I can't just jump from what's happening here to what sort of the next major key point, and that I find tricky. So I said that. And then the other things that people came up with was, which we might be able to give some quite good tips here, I think, but I'll read the list first and then maybe we can go through it. So action tags versus basic dialogue tags. That was what someone said. Plotting, figuring out the storyline. Well, I'm no, help with that. Um, but conversations, I thought this was quite an interesting one. Conversations and community outside the main characters. So this person was writing romance.
Mhm.
But yeah, like you've got to build a world, don't you? And two people that are falling in love they're not doing that in
Mhm.
isolation. They've usually got friends, they've got family,
Mhm.
they work. And so people were, talking. So I've got a few ideas there. Fear was a big one. And I think we've spoken about that quite
Mhm.
a lot before. Just getting started
Yeah.
was one of them. And this is a good one. The line between showing versus telling, or showing and telling. I
Um,
have a few things to say on that, and a couple of really famous authors who I've heard talk about it in the last. One did a Substack and one listened to a podcast. The middle bit, and yeah, I think that was the main ones. So I know we don't have too long, but what do you say? Shall I just? How are we going to do this? Do you
well,
think?
I think you go first, and so we'll, as in, go first on the first item you want to discuss, and
Okay.
then we'll just discuss it.
Okay, so I find description hard. Now, here's my confession. I find description hard because I couldn't care less what someone looks like, or what they're wearing, really. I mean, I know it builds character because, like I've got pink hair. Obviously, that probably says something about my personality. Um, but I do find it hard to come up with sort of original, different descriptions for people. Or like literally, whenever I've described a guy, I'm thinking, okay, he's tall, dark,
Yeah.
handsome, or whatever, and middle-aged woman with like I'm just. And the other thing, that's people description. The other I find really hard, and I confess here, sometimes I get my friend Anthea to help me with my description of places,
Mhm.
because I send her a photo and say, give me some ideas, and I just mean her to send me like a couple of words that kind of will kick me off, but then she'll write this whole beautiful description. I'll have to just plant it in my book. So she's written. But yeah, and I think again it's because none of that really matters to me. What
Mhm.
matters to me is what people are thinking inside and how they're feeling. But I know that we do need, that a bit of an element of world building. And so it's interesting when I'm reading someone else's book, I'm really looking for those things, because now I've realized that they're not my strengths. So I like to sort of, sometimes I'll highlight, not to copy obviously, but just to see how different people describe, the room or a person they meet. Because when it's done well, it's amazing, right? And I guess I want to do it well. I don't just want to say, there was a room with a wooden desk in it and a pink rug or whatever. I like it when people evoke feeling in that sort of stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, what are your feelings about description, and have you got any advice?
Well, I don't put much in either,
Yeah.
because I very rarely describe physical traits of my characters, and in terms of building the world around them, I I've do it through other means. So
Well, yeah, tell me.
actually saying, oh, don't you have beautiful brown eyes, rather than telling the reader. There's a showing versus telling part of it as
Yeah.
well. I don't want to just tell the reader they had brown eyes if it doesn't advance the story. So
That's
I
how I feel too. Like, a lot of it doesn't advance the story.
doesn't. I live by the rule that every sentence has to advance the story.
Okay, that's really good advice.
Spending time saying that the character is 5'6" and has grey hair and does that, yes, may put a picture in the reader's mind, but it hasn't advanced the story. And as a reader, I actually do find it annoying when that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
That's a big reason why I don't do it, because
Same.
as soon as the characters come to life on the page, especially if there's dialogue or we're in their thoughts, just get a picture of who they are. And if
Yeah.
the writer of that book then comes in and tells me how they look, I get annoyed. I'm like, no, hang on, that is not the person I
Yeah,
imagined.
yeah. It's like when a movie version comes of the book and you're like,
Yeah.
ooh. It's interesting. I think I heard a podcast ages ago. I think it was Claire. Oh no, I can't remember, so I'm not gonna say it exact. But someone talked about, they were talking about their book, which I haven't read, and saying that there's literally no kind of description of anyone in there, and nobody noticed, and nobody like, and I probably wouldn't notice because I often skim over too much description
See,
in books.
therefore it's not needed.
Too, that's true as well. But what I find is often I'll have publishers or editors say to me, "What does this person look like?" Or I need a bit more about the and so
Just go back and say, why do you want to know?
true. Okay, good.
Why is it important?
All
Because
right.
why is it important? I just, in terms of place description, what I do get asked to put in even more description of landscape and
Because I
season.
mean, your places are often the setting is quite
That's right.
a part of it. Because you even said that you choose your setting quite early on,
So
so
I'll do
that
that, and then I'll be asked for even more. And I do know that some people like it, but I have only ever had one reader say anything to me about the fact that I don't put physical characteristics in.
interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I've ever had anyone that I can think of say or any reviews where people have said I don't.
You're
Yeah.
letting the reader use their imagination about how that character looks, and that
Okay.
also means that that character can be any ethnicity.
Yeah.
Uh, it, we're,
Yes.
if we're not saying who they are, it's really up to the reader's imagination to think of who they want to put in that,
That's
and
true.
that's unless it's particularly relevant to the storyline that we say.
Yeah, they can put their own they can identify with themselves in that book if they want or not. If you do have to do a description, like, do you have any tricks?
I think with places in particular, I close my eyes and envisage it, and then I try to think of descriptors, so color, light, lines, shapes. So it just, and this is landscape stuff now. It's
Yeah.
thinking about colors of bark, for example, and colors of
Yeah,
leaves,
yeah.
the trees would look like, or what the um, bushes would look like, or whatever it is. And again, you just need enough to paint a picture for the
Yeah.
reader relevant in that moment. If it's not relevant to know what that building looks like,
Yeah, we don't need it.
just say it's a 7-story building and let
Yeah.
the reader decide.
I do sometimes look up pictures just to give me a like, I don't think I'm a very visual person, so if I have to describe, say, a barber or something, I'll Google barber and then look at Google images of photos, and then that gives me kind of an idea.
And back to that in terms of why you might be asked to give that detail, most readers would be able to envisage what a barbershop looks like.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
do you therefore need to describe it in the text unless it's going to advance the story? So for the
yeah,
you're getting saying describe this, I would go back and say why.
yeah. That's a good point. Why is often a question we need to ask the writer.
The editors are coming at it with their own history, experience, biases about how things should be, and
Yeah,
all, especially women, live in worlds of shoulds, right? You should do this,
yep.
you should do that, be a good girl, follow this rule,
Why?
do that. Why? And I am not a questioner. We've been through the tendencies, the
Mm.
tendencies framework. I'm not a questioner.
Supposedly I am.
Supposedly of that, but it's more just thinking this is not useful for this story, and I
Yeah,
think you're asking me the question reflexively because you think that this is what should be in there. But in a literary novel, sure, spend time
mm,
describing things, use poetic language. That's what the reader wants from that. The books we're writing, they're moving along. There's a story to be told. I am not going to bog down my readers in unnecessary detail just because
yeah,
someone should be there. It's like, no, I want to keep that story moving along. If I need to know, or if the reader needs to know that the character has blue eyes for whatever reason, then I'll probably have another character
yeah,
say,
yeah. Definitely. You never want the looking in the mirror and putting up my pink hair into a ponytail.
maybe
um,
it makes me too ruthless, I don't know, but I just feel like it's
No, I
again.
don't think it is. I think that's great advice because it sort of clarified what I already kind of thought in terms of it's like, oh, I should be good at this. But as you've questioned why, and maybe I'm not good at it because I really don't care about it.
And then
And
you just said I should be good at it, but you also mentioned earlier too that you've been reading it in other books because you've been told to put it in your own, not because you're
yeah,
interested in it.
no, that's true. I mean, occasionally I love a really cute, clever description, but yeah, a lot of the times it's not, doesn't add to the story. So it's
Right.
like,
So
why is it there?
why
Okay,
is
my
it?
next thing is hooks. How much do you think about hooks at the end of chapters?
I think about the rhythm of the ending of the chapter, and by that I
Okay.
mean when I'm writing my way towards the end of the chapter, I'll stop and think, does it need another beat?
Yeah, yeah.
And if I feel that it needs another beat, then that's probably when I'll pause the most is ends of chapters because I like
Interesting.
to have some kind of end beat that that feels good for the reader
Yeah.
and so matches the business of the chapter. So I will often stop at that point and think, what is right in this moment? That's going to just pause here, because we know many people, including me, will put a
Put a
bookmark
book down
at the
there.
end of a chapter and move on. So you just want to have that nice little beat at the end, and then they can move on to the next chapter. So it's really about the feeling of it. Sometimes I know when it's not right, but I'll just put it in because I want to keep moving at that point. So
Yeah,
all right,
same.
put something in.
I
And
often actually find that in my like rewrites or edit or whatever, and this is why I think maybe I'm thinking about it a little more as I write now. I feel like I'm more not intuitive, what's the word? I do think more. I'm probably where I'm slower. I think more about each step now rather than just kind of charging through. And one thing I used to notice more, but I think now because I've noticed that I'm thinking about it more as I'm actually doing it, is that I often don't need the last sentence or I
right,
don't need the last paragraph. And so here's a tip for anyone who's listening and wants that sort of hook at the end of the chapter that makes people not want to close the book or keep reading, is sometimes you have a hook there, but it's not actually like you've gone past the hook. You've
right.
kept writing. I don't know if you know what I mean. Like I just find that sometimes I've had if I'm struggling to find a hook at the end and I'm thinking, oh, this is not a very interesting way to end a chapter, or I'm like, hang on, I've said too much. We don't actually need this last bit. So often like my tip is to look back
Mhm.
a few paragraphs and see if there's an earlier place to stop that I often found there's quite a good hook somewhere there.
Well, and that approach for you, and I have a similar one, I think comes out of our experience of being ruthless with our own words,
Yeah.
which also comes out of experience of writing quite a few stories now, which is that I'm just simply not attached to
Yeah,
it.
same.
It's already on the page. If it's not serving the story, it's out.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting better at that too. And I think that's why I'm actually slowly not writing as long a book, I think. We'll see how we go. I'm at 55,000 words. We'll see what happens. But on that length, I've got two questions to ask you quickly. And that is, do you have a chapter, because we're talking about hooks and ends of chapters, do you have like a word length for chapter that you
No,
like or you think is best? You don't think about it at all? So some could be like 7,000, one could be 2,000 or
never think in terms of word counts for chapters.
yeah.
I think it's just I write the scene, and I'm or scenes in a chapter depending on what's needed. That chapter needs to move the story along, and I've decided what part of the story is being moved along. Once I'm satisfied that the story has been moved along for the purposes of that chapter, I'm on to the next thing.
Because I start getting a bit twitchy if it gets above 4,500, 5,000 words. I start thinking, oh, that's too long.
I have no idea how
I
many.
pay too much attention to. And then my next question, sort of related to that, is: are you an underwriter or an overwriter?
I'd say underwriter only because I realized a while ago how much I edit my work on the line as I'm going, and
Yeah.
I only found that out by control zing my way out of something
Yeah,
like
you said that. But
that.
do you add then in your like editor edits, publisher edits?
As in, do I add words
Like,
when
does your book sort of say the book you submit, is that usually shorter than the one you get
I
printed?
often intentionally shorter,
Yeah.
just because I know they'll ask me to write more. So
Mm,
I tend to undercook it a little bit, and then there's room if they do want more. And if they don't ask for more, then I've got room if I'm writing some extra material in response to some requested changes, then I know I have some room there to do
yeah.
it.
Whereas I'm definitely an overwriter, I would say. And some of that, I'm just going to jump from my hardest thing, two questions here, because I'm leading into one of the things that someone else said. But I think one of the reasons I'm an overwriter is for years, I waffle to work out what I'm trying to say. That's one of the problems. Like if I think possibly pantsers are more overwriters than plotters because we're kind of trying to work out the story. So we sometimes write more to sort of get there. But the other thing I worked out that I do through many different editors is I show and tell.
Right.
So, I will show the fear of someone panicky and their visceral reactions and all this sort of stuff. And then I'll be like, I'll say something that kind of reaffirms or vice versa. So I thought because I was just thinking about that, maybe we should go on to this person who said on Threads that one of the things that they find difficult is the lines between showing and telling. And before I get your opinion, I just want to give a bit of background in that. I feel like I've been to a number of, writing conferences in the last 25 years and workshops and stuff where people are like, there's often one about showing, not telling,
Mhm.
right? And you can see when you're judging books, and I'm sure you see it sometimes, that, some people just like completely tell a story and there's no kind of emotion in there. And you think they could do with a little bit of showing. But
Mhm.
then I read some books that I really, really love. And I think this is mostly just telling, yet
Yeah.
somehow it works.
Yes.
And sometimes too much showing is exhausting, not
Yes.
for the writer, but the reader. And I actually listened I listened to Charlotte Wood talking to, I think it was on Michelle Barraclough's book the Writers Book Club podcast. I listened last week when I was driving back from my old town. And Charlotte Wood was talking a bit about telling and versus showing. And she was like saying, basically, she thinks telling is, gets a bad rep. And that sometimes, telling is the best way to tell a story, obviously. Yet I also got a Substack from Jennifer Weiner, who was saying the exact opposite. She was critiquing Britney Spears'
Um,
biography, which I haven't read. I don't know whether you have, but she was saying basically if she was the editor, she would have painted much more of a picture than Britney did, because Britney was just tell rather than, saying the day I was 7 and I was thinking this, the woods were making this fishy noise and my heart, And so I think this telling versus showing thing is an interesting one, because it's one of those rules that we're told
mm,
you must show rather than tell.
mm.
Yeah, is that a good rule? And so I'm interested in your opinion as a reader, writer, and an editor on this whole showing versus telling.
I think it's a matter of personal preference, and it's also a matter of fashion. And by that, I mean the fashion of,
Ooh,
if you look
yeah.
at Thornbirds, for example,
Mm,
there's a lot of telling in that. Now, the
yeah.
fashion at that time, and in fact, I'm a big fan of the 80s bonkbusters, as they're known, the
Yep,
Judy
yep.
Frances of the world, the Jilly Coopers, Jackie Collins. Jackie was pretty pacey, though. There was quite a lot of showing in her books. But Judith Krantz, there is a lot of telling that goes on in those, because there
Yep.
was so much story that they had to really just spend a lot of
You
pages.
can't show everything if you've got a big lot of story to tell, or you'd be there for 1,000 pages.
Exactly. They had to build a world, and there was all the they data to speaking of details. Judith would put a lot of details in, and so that was the fashion
Well,
then.
details are telling, really, aren't they?
Exactly.
Description is telling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fashion at that time was for a lot of telling, I think, and some showing.
Yep.
And you will find books today where there is that kind of mode of doing it. There's a lot of telling and some amounts of dialogue when it's required. Certainly, I get pushed for even more showing than I already have, and I write a lot of dialogue.
Yeah,
And
yep.
at a certain point where I got quite irritated, and I said, "Look, I have been through other novels in this genre, and I'm writing a lot more dialogue than most of these books that are published. Why am I being
Oh,
asked to do?"
I've said the same or thought the same. Sometimes in my editing, I've been told this could be shown, or show this conversation, can we have this in dialogue rather than, and I'm like, it's not important enough to be in dialogue, or we don't really need it. It's like an example would be, say, they drove from the cemetery to the beach and talked about, their favorite music and their favorite movies in that time. And the editor, that's very just off the top of my head
I know
example.
exactly what you mean
But
by
the editor would then be like, well, can we see, what was that conversation like? What are their favorite movies? What are the, and like, obviously sometimes favorite movies is important, and some conversation is very important, I think, in books and dialogue, especially in the romance and women's fiction genre.
that.
um I heard someone say years ago that a vulnerable conversation between two people who are, like, interested in each other is more powerful than a first kiss, like, or a good kiss, you know what I mean? Because if you are sharing emotional, intimacy and letting down walls that you haven't let with anyone else, that is, you can kiss lots of people or whatever, like what I mean? So I think conversation is really, really important, but not conversation that's just there for the sake of, of it, if that
Yeah,
makes sense. And
absolutely. Because again,
yeah,
it doesn't advance the story. It's like asking for details. What does this person look like? Why? So you go
yeah,
back and asking why. Uh, if that conversation about favorite movies had
matters.
advance the story in some way, that you were telling us something about that character through the dialogue that was going to be useful later on or was relevant to our overall understanding of that person, sure, put that dialogue in. But if all it's doing is adding words for the sake of putting them in a car and they're chit-chatting, that's just wasting the reader's time, as far as I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Yes. Well, how long have we got left?
Oh no, we'll just keep chatting. So for those who are listening, we're talking on a Saturday night. I'm about to go out to a gig. I said to Rachel, I've only got about an hour. So
Sophie has a social life, unlike me.
we have 15 minutes left.
All I've got is walking the dog. Because well, that when you were talking about we're talking about like that sentence that I just said, say, you know, they're going from the cemetery to the beach or whatever. It's kind of a little bit transition. So do you know what I mean by I have problems with transition scenes?
Not exactly. So please tell me what
I'm
you
trying
mean.
to explain. I think it's kind of like it's really hard in terms of I know that I don't even know if I can explain it myself. I know a lot of people when I said it, they're like, yes, transitions too. It's kind of getting from A to B, but like maybe it's like you need a bit of development, you know, happening, or you need time to have passed, but you don't want to just say, you know, 3 days later.
Yeah.
Like maybe I should just say 3 days later. Um,
Okay,
or
so in that context, what I would do is work in something that the character is telling someone else or thinking about, and I would refer to the fact that it happened however many days before. So we know
yeah,
that it's all saying, "Oh, it's been 4 days since such and such happened.
yeah,
Now here she is." This, or you could say such and such happened, and now here she is a week later, and X, Y, Z. I would just do it as quickly as that because we just want to move that story along
yeah.
and bog the reader down in unnecessary detail.
Yeah,
That
I'm not
makes
sure if I've explained it properly. I'll have to think a little bit more on that.
I'm sure I'm
Yeah,
right. I'm sure I know, I'm sure I'm doing whatever it is.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I'm sure.
definitely. If anyone's got a better way to describe transition scenes and has a problem with them, let me know so I can explain it better. The other thing that sometimes I get, a lot of people say they have problems with, and I do get it sometimes in my books, and now I try and avoid it as best possible, is timeline. You know,
Keeping track of character.
yeah, like when the book starts, is it in March, and you know, like days, how much attention do you have to pay to like, do you think much about the timeline of your book before you start as you go on? Like what's
Goes
your
into that initial planning document I do with all the chapters in and the points of view. And sorry, just on the transition scene thing, something occurred to me. I think because I write multiple points of view, I don't have the same
yeah,
concern.
which is probably that may have been actually maybe when I think about it, maybe in my romances, or especially now the ones that I've written like Bridget and the one I'm writing now, I'm Fred, there's literally one point of view. Whereas when I've had the romances, there's two, you know, the rural romance, and that does help a little bit. And as
Inherently
you
goes
said,
on.
when I've written multi-point of view women's fiction, maybe I'm not seeing that as much because
So I
yeah,
think it might be particular to a single narrator,
yeah.
single point of view. But just in terms of, sorry, what was the other question?
Timelines. How do you go about? Do you think much about them? Do you worry about them? Do you get in
I
trouble
don't
for it?
worry about them because I just think I can always fix it up in the copy edit phase at the very last gasp if I need to. So it doesn't usually get that far, but in my planning document I have a column for seasons,
Yeah.
usually, or months, depending on how I've decided to
Because
structure
you
it.
have quite your like I think your book's often a longer in time period than mine are.
Yeah, so I tend to just do that, and then I will lose track while I'm writing
Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
the nature of things. But because I want to put in some description, here's that word, of seasons changing or to indicate that a season has changed, I just do like to note where a season's
That's
changing.
another way to show transition too, just the different
Yeah,
passings of seasons.
there you go. So some autumn leaves are always a good touch.
Hmm.
But I will forget while I'm
Yeah, we
writing
don't have any seasons in WA. We just have summer
because that's right. You just temper it all the time.
at the moment. Same. See?
Go to the beautiful West. It's warm.
I think winter's forgotten us, but yeah, that's interesting. Well, I try and I figured out I never used to think about timeline at all, and then I'd get through it, and someone would be like, "But she was pregnant only for 6 months," and, like, you need to fix that. And so I'd always get myself in a hole. But I've got a solution for that, which I can actually give credit to Sally Hepworth for this. I read her book. I didn't write her book. Let's not spread any rumors. I read her book a few years ago. I think it was either The Mother-in-Law or The Soulmate. And I realized there was, no, was it anyway, it was, I'm trying to remember now. I think I was wrong. But I realized that I thought about this book and I thought, hang on, like in the beginning it was like, I'm trying to remember what it is so I can explain to it later. But I'm going to look it up while I'm talking. In the beginning it's like a month, it tells you like a time. I don't know what exactly the time was, but then it says like a month earlier or a year earlier,
Okay.
right? Oh, it was the younger wife. So it says a year earlier. And then basically you don't think anywhere about anything about time. She
Right.
never mentions the day or the month or anything until we're back to a year later. And I realized that, yeah, I'm often thinking, oh, I should say it's Wednesday or, it's this time of the month or whatever. And I emailed Sally and I was like, oh my goodness, you didn't write, like, there's no references about, what day it was when people were meeting or if it was a Sunday or any of that sort of stuff. And she's like, yeah, I've purposefully just don't reference time at all. And it didn't matter. And I've done that now or tried to for a couple of books, not Bridget, I don't think, because it depends on the book, you know what I mean? Like
I think it
some
depends on the book.
it
Yes.
does, but if you don't need, if timeline is not a big thing and it's something that's a problem with, just ignore it.
Yeah.
That's my tip.
Yeah. A pregnancy will always force you to pay attention to a timeline and
Yes.
see the character because, built in due date then.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if it's not relevant to the story, and I keep coming back to this, if it's not going to advance the story, if it's just a distraction for the reader, don't worry about it. And if you have editorial feedback asking you to worry about it, you are perfectly within your rights to go back and ask why you need to worry.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really good, like, advice again. We've got a few more things, but some of them are not hugely massive things. So I think maybe the one that someone talked about that I think I've discussed all my kind of issues. Someone said, I mean, plotting versus that's a huge, that's a
Rach,
whole.
we can always do a part two. That's the other thing. If you have
That's what I was thinking as well. But I don't know if there's a huge amount kind of left, unless there's other people that have, issues. But we were thinking maybe we'd do a live on Instagram or
that's
something.
true.
So
Yes.
maybe people, you could send us your questions for that. But there's one more small thing maybe we have time to discuss, and that's action tags versus basic dialogue tags. And when, you know, do you think much about that? I think I'd like to go back to one of my earlier books actually and compare it to, the way I'm writing now. I think I am a lot sparser
Mhm.
with action tags. What you said earlier about rhythm at the end of chapters and rhythm of sentences, that's the same with me with action tags and said and
Could
stuff,
you give could you give the listeners an example of what you mean by your action tags and your
Yeah,
dialogue?
so an action tag would be, hang on, let me try and I can't find one. So obviously, here's a not action tag. You're too young to be alone, Daisy said, right? That's just a same simple tag.
Mhm.
Oh, golly, I'm now trying to think. Maybe this is kind of one. Oh, I'm sorry to give you any numbers, he says, scratching his head. That's a boring one, but I don't have any single relatives your age. Here's another one, maybe. That's okay. I manage not to laugh as I draw a copy of Lee Child's book from behind my back, kind of thing. Like, so it's kind of, no, that's not really, because that was, I'm trying to think, but yeah, you maybe have a better idea of how to explain it than me, Miss
Well,
Editor.
I don't actually, because again, this is just me working more about, yes, rhythm in text and also quite instinctually is what feels right at this point in time. How much detail is too much to give you for a tag? It's like, well, quite often when I'm writing dialogue, it will just say he said, she said, or
Or
whatever.
not even that. Sometimes you don't need that because
I
if there's
don't
only
want
two
it all.
people in the conversation or whatever, it
Yeah.
can be pretty clear. So I would say for that person who said that they struggle with that is less is more. Only use it if you absolutely need it. But
So
I do think like I guess this is an action tag. Xavier nods in agreement. I mean, probably didn't even need the in agreement there.
I'm mad for a nod, and I'm also very fond of a shrug and a wink.
I
Uh,
love a shrug. I love a smirk as well.
a
Um,
smirk, a glower, or and a glare,
yes, grimace.
where they're needed.
Yeah. I'm just, as I said, I'm looking through. I mean, shaking your head is an action tag
Yeah.
instead, but I think, yeah, the less is more. Here's one. I lift the bottle of Prosecco and angle it towards him. As long as it takes for us to finish this, she said. I didn't say she says in there, but I've just added that so you know. So yeah, I narrow my eyes at him and then she speaks.
Yeah.
So they're action tags, I guess, rather than just saying, so this says, I narrow my eyes at him. Prove it. Tell me all the things that aren't so great about you. So instead of saying, prove it, tell me all the things that aren't so great about you, I say narkily.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
said, I narrow my eyes at
Nice.
him.
Yeah.
So I guess for the person who says they struggle between working out action tags versus basic dialogue tags, is I would use everything sparsely. And
Well, the example you just gave is a great one. She narrows her eyes. That sets up the emotional state of the person who's about to speak, so the
yes.
reader knows how the tone is likely to come out.
And I
So
guess that is showing rather than using a telling dialogue tag. So
yeah.
in sometimes showing versus telling works in dialogue, as much as in description, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Because when you think about it, she narrows her eyes. Well, in 4 words, you've conveyed quite a lot there. We have a
Yeah.
picture in our heads of how the character looks. We also can anticipate that her tone of voice is likely to be a little
Cranky.
terse,
Yeah.
and that she's got an attitude towards the person she's about to speak to. So there's a whole lot of work in just 4 words. That's really economical.
Yeah.
But if you'd said the dialogue and then put she says feeling
Like a
little,
cranky voice or
that's clunkier. And by then we've already heard what she said, so we'd have to retroactively apply it. So you
yeah.
think it's better
Yeah,
to have
that's
that
true.
action tag before whatever she's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost time for you to go to your gig. But I've really enjoyed this chat and I'm sure there's lots of other things. So maybe another part 2 would be good if anyone listening can send us the bits of writing that they find difficult. And we'll discuss how our feelings about that aspect of writing a book. And then we can
Questions
have
in
another
general.
part
Yeah.
2. What's that, sorry?
Questions in general, we're happy to take. We
Yeah.
are thinking of doing an Insta Live to answer just general questions, but we'll keep thinking about that. And if we're going to do it, we'll
And we will make sure we let everyone know well in advance.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can let us know if you'd like to attend that Insta Live, and that'll make us feel warm and fuzzy and like people want us to do it, and then we might actually do it.
Yay! Have you got anything exciting planned for this week apart from your gig, which you're off to now?
Yes, there's a work sales conference on. So we have an 80s theme for the party, and I'm going as Madonna crossed with Melanie Griffith from Working Girls.
I really hope you'll be putting a photo on Instagram of that.
I might have to. Madonna used to put, because I used to be a Madonna obsessive. She used to put olive oil in her hair in the early 80s, and I'm considering that's how she got that slightly matted effect.
Oh, hello. Are you going to do it?
Considering doing it.
But olive oil is very expensive now. It's very.
That's true. But suffice to say, I've got a genuine 1980s Carla Zampatti blazer with massive shoulder
Oh my
pads.
gosh. I
Melanie
can't
Griffith in
wait to
Working
see
Girl.
photos.
And then Madonna used to tie a scarf in her hair with a big bow.
Yep.
There'll be a bit of that. There will be some heavier eyeliner that I might otherwise use.
You
There'll be
have such an exciting life. I've got literally nothing apart from a doctor's appointment and a podcast with you, which is always exciting. Oh no, I do have a library talk at Success Library in WA this Thursday night. So if anyone in WA wants to come along, you can find info about that on my Facebook or on the Coburn Library Success Library websites.
fantastic. Because we are unusually recording this just before we're going to post it, Rach. So
yeah, exactly. That's why I thought I'd put it out there in case anyone wants to come hear me chat.
absolutely, and please do put the details in the post when you post this podcast. Well, once again, a delight to chat to you. We'll be chatting again soon.
And we have a guest next time.
We do. I'll talk to you
All
soon.
right. See you later. Bye.